Let's talk about eating disorders and abuse. Trigger warning. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I am a licensed therapist. I've been counseling men and women who have been victims and perpetrators of abuse for many years now. And I want to take this time to answer a listener question. And you guys, you can certainly chime in, right? Hi, Dr. Jones. You don't know me, but can you do a video on bulimia or anorexia and how childhood may have affected it in not the typical points of you were called fat, she has in air quotes, but point out how being used and abused and how partners can amount to it. Please, I am begging. Sorry for that. I had to sort of decipher. So thank you so much for asking this question. So I'll let you know, like, eating disorders isn't, per se my wheelhouse. I have treated people with eating disorders, but, if you follow me long enough, you know what I'm used to treating. That being said, I have worked a lot with people with eating disorders, if that makes sense. My training and my work experience covers that. So I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. First of all, from what I know about people who have eating disorders, and I'm gonna just say eating disorders as a broad spectrum. I know you asked about bulimia and anorexia, but I'm gonna cover bulimia, anorexia, restrictive eating disorders, orthorexia. I'm gonna put all of that in one lump category and just say eating disorders. So from what I know of people who have eating disorders, a lot of them grew up in very rigid and abusive households. And so one of the reasons that eating disorders typically manifest, to my understanding, is that people who have eating disorders, they are looking to get some type of control. They very seldom feel like they have control in other areas of their life, usually because it's a firm or rigid parent or an abusive parent or a parent with an addiction. And so there's just like chaos everywhere, and they grow up in a really unsafe environment, or they can grow up in a well-to-do home and their parents are just simply controlling every aspect of their lives and not really allowing that person to have a voice. But it could be any sort of mixture of those dynamics, but control seems to be the major factor. Control in emotional regulation. And so when you look at eating disorders, people tend to that's one aspect of it. So when you look at eating disorders for a lot of people who have them is a way to sort of regulate themselves and to have some form of control in their lives. Maybe they feel out of control in other areas or lack of control in other areas, but I can control what I eat or what I don't eat, right? And so no one can force me to do that. And so that's a way that manifests. It also helps to emotionally regulate. A lot of people who have eating disorders have trouble with regulating or managing their emotions. So those emotions could be anxious, they could be depression, they could be anger, frustration, but for many different reasons, they feel like I can't sit with my emotions. I can't outwardly express them. Like, it's hard for me to express emotions emotionally, but I feel better if I can deal with my emotions physically. So that's where things like eating disorders come in. That's where things like other forms of self-harm come in. So like burning yourself, hitting yourself, cutting yourself, and a lot of tattoos as well, because I feel like tattooing falls into the category of cutting for a lot of people. A lot of people who engage in self-harm also get a lot of tattoos, and I've done a video on that way back when. And so again, when people feel like, okay, if I'm feeling an intense, overwhelming emotions, I can essentially, trigger warning, I can vomit, or I can deprive myself of food, or I can do these other things or I can sort of binge and then purge my food, and then I immediately feel better, like all is right with the world. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, again, trigger warning here, is sexual abuse. So there's a lot of people who have eating disorders that grew up, not everybody, but grew up being sexually abused. And so when people are sexually abused, especially as children or even as adults, they feel an intense amount of shame, and that shame is turned inward, and it's more like, because I have this challenge with shame, I start picking myself apart, and one of the ways that which people pick themselves apart is by looking at their body, picking apart their body, and that's where things like body dysmorphia comes in, where it's like people don't accurately perceive how they look. They tend to think that they look fat or ugly or overweight, even if they weigh just like 90 pounds or something like that. That's why they still are very hyper fixated on that. Again, it's like picking apart their body. And again, adding to that, if they continue to have extreme stress or emotional overwhelm, they go back to their default, which is internalizing their emotions and picking themselves apart. So I go back to the first point I made. To a lot of people, I'll make a third point. A lot of people with eating disorders also have a comorbid diagnosis. So they may have other like medical stuff, but mental health wise, they typically have a comorbid diagnosis, and it runs a lot in my experience and what I've seen in people who have borderline personality disorder. And I've treated a lot of people with borderline personality disorder. So a lot of people with eating disorders and who have borderline have that black and white thinking. It's all or nothing. I can't regulate my relationships. So it's either idealization, like you're up on a pedestal, or devaluation. They're quick to put you down. And then there's a lot of just sort of storm and strife in their relationships. So one of the biggest difficulties people with eating disorders can have is challenges with managing their interpersonal relationships, particularly if they have a comorbid diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. As you may or may not know, people with borderline disorder, they are fearful of abandonment, and they want to be loved despite the storm and strife and the challenges in their interpersonal relationships. They desperately crave companionship. Now, they have difficulty managing that in a lot of cases, but a lot of people with borderline personality disorder and also eating disorder end up with people who are abusers, because those relationships become very codependent, and a lot of times they have some of those same overlapping traits. Those traits may be trauma, codependency, and then also that idealization and devaluation, which also leads to further abuse or further parasitic relationships. Because if we've been in something long enough, it starts to look normal to us. And people who have challenges with eating disorders may wax and wane between wanting to be taken care of and wanting to take care of others. And guess who's attracted to that? People who are abusive, people who are extremely codependent, and people who are narcissistic. So it's not uncommon to see person with borderline personality disorder linked up with someone who has narcissistic or antisocial personality disorder. Hope that helps. And this is sort of scratching the surface. So this isn't a comprehensive video, but it's what I can do in 10 minutes. Let me know if you have any additional questions. Like, follow, and share. Thank you so much.